Welcome to Childcare Conversations, the podcast where early childhood leaders like you get real-world strategies, honest talk, and a whole lot of support. Whether you're running one center or many, we're here to help you lead with confidence and clarity. This episode is brought to you by our summer partner, Childcare Business Growth, your go-to solution for filling spots, increasing revenue, and scaling your childcare business without the burnout. We're proud to partner with a team that's as committed to your success as we are. Learn more at childcarebusinessgrowth.com. Now, let's get into today's conversation, one we think you're really going to love.
What if you stopped leading like someone else and started leading like you?
I mean, I'm pretty sure nobody else leads like me, so I think we're good. So I think the podcast is over. If that's all we needed to do is get me to lead like me, we're done. We're good.
Okay, I don't really think that's what we're talking about. So what would you describe as your leadership strengths and or weak spots?
Oh, okay. So I think for me, one of my definite strengths is the ability to see outside the box. To come up with a new idea that other people haven't thought of before. But I mean, that's one of your strengths too.
But how does that work with your team? So when you had 4 centers and you had multiple directors and a lot of staff, how did that help you?
I mean, it helped me because I wasn't afraid to get second and third and fourth schools and to try things when other things weren't working. But fortunately for me, most people aren't as excited by change as I am. And it took me a while because, I mean, I started as a director in my early 20s. And I had not yet realized that most people don't love change.
What?
Yeah, I mean, for you and I, this is like a bananas concept because to us, change is super exciting and wonderful. And that's why we have, I don't know how many businesses. I figure it out every year when I do my taxes because it's how many K1s I have. But I think that people who have that leadership style of I will ready, fire, aim that we have is not the most common leadership style. And it's also, creates some problems for our team because we're running off chasing the shiny new object, or as we usually say, squirreling, because, you saw that in Up and you were like, nope, that's me for the rest of my life. I will just say squirrel every time. So,
And I'm pretty sure that the staff that are listening to this that have worked with us over the years are probably going, yep,
they will squirrel.
They will squirrel. So, okay, so
are we saying that everybody who listens to us and goes to our conferences and stuff, that they should all also be like and be the ready, fire, aim?
Oh, I hope not. But I do think what's really important though, because everybody hears this term leadership, right? Like this is like, I don't want to say it's the buzzword, but it is a word that a lot of times we don't necessarily know. So as a director listening to today's podcast, Carrie, what is important about understanding your own personal or just in general leadership identity?
I think one of the important things is to understand that in order to be a leader, you have to have people following you. And I have no idea where I first heard it, so I can't give attribution. But somebody said, how can you tell a leader from a duck? And I was like, I don't know how. I mean, I thought of lots of ways that you can tell the difference, like one has feathers, one has skin, things like that. But he said, if you turn around and there's people following you, you're a leader. And if you turn around and nobody's following you, you're a duck. Because there's a reason we have that phrase, get all your ducks in a row, because even a mama duck with her baby ducks, the baby ducks are just all over the place.
They do what they want to do.
Yeah,
I got that.
And so if you're in your program and nobody is following what you are asking them to do, then you're a duck, not a leader.
So how does being a duck as a leadership style, which I feel like there's a book in that somewhere, like, are you a duck? Is that your leadership style? All right, so next weekend. Anyway, so what does that mean for the rest of the team? Does that mean that there's people chasing behind them? Does that mean that they don't even have all their ducks in the same pond? What does that mean?
I mean, to me, I think sometimes if you are a duck instead of a leader, you might have a couple of geese, maybe a swan. Like, you don't even know who is on your team.
An exhausted pigeon?
Yeah, an exhausted pigeon, maybe a loon, and they're doing their own things. They don't have anybody trying to take them in a direction. Maybe it's the, are you a goose or are you a duck? Because like a goose, the leader goose knows where they're going. Maybe that's the issue.
You know, goose kind of bite and nip at people. I don't know. Maybe.
But as a leader, you sometimes do need to snip at people. You have to say, look, I get that you would like to be on your cell phone texting your significant other right now, but I'm paying you. And so no cell phones in the classroom.
So a duck is the one that puts their head in the water instead of their head in the sand. They just got their butt up in the air.
Yeah, I mean, if you were a leader, then people are following you. And if you aren't sure if people are following you, come up with a plan of something you want to do and see who wants to help you with that. And if no one wants to help you with that,
Oh, so they're a duck?
at least in that situation,
So you got a duck, and a goose?
maybe.
And then you run really fast in a circle. And then you fall down.
So I think that what you have to figure out as a leader is what are your values? What are the values that you think are important? And once you know what you value in your program, then do a little bit of analysis of, am I communicating that with the rest of the team?
Okay, so can I back this up? Okay, so let's talk about, you're a director. You might be a new director. You might be a director who's been in childcare or in leadership management for a really, really long time. And we know there's a difference between being a manager and a leader.
Yes.
Where might be a good place for someone to start with this whole, and yes, I could say go get our book, Leadership for Childcare Directors, and we know that there are dozens of books out there. We would like to encourage you to go find books that were written by female leaders. Born to Lead by Brene Brown, is just an example. Go find those leadership books that resonate with you.
And there could be leadership books that resonate with you that are written by a dude, but girls and guys lead differently. Women tend to lead by consensus building and by being mission driven. That just tends to be how women are most successful in leading.
Okay.
So that's part of why we suggest the books written by women, is because it's more likely to talk about getting people onto your team and about what are your values and things like that than, Think and Grow Rich, right? That book doesn't talk about any of the things that are generally women's strengths in leadership.
Well, we also know that, and let's just talk about women and girls who are bold, right? So they're bold, and a lot of times they come back and they're being bossy, right?
Or excellent leadership potential.
Is what it would be if they were a dude, but if it's
I got it on my.
Well, that's awesome,
work.
but I often would hear people tell me that I'm bossy. But if those same leadership styles were being done by my peers that were men, they were exhibiting exactly what you said, leadership styles. So I would like to really encourage those who are listening to stop and be self-aware. Like, I think that is the number one leadership skill that everybody in management, leadership, even if you're a teacher, you're still leading, because you're still leading all those little people in your room. You're still leading a co-teacher. You're leading and working with parents. So just being self-aware is just an important place to start. But then, Carrie, there's all these tools and all these assessments, and and there's a quiz on social media for everything. Like, you could always, I'm gonna, sorting hats, and what color am I, and my parachute, and what letter am I, or color, there's all kinds of things like that. So how does that play into, identifying whether or not you're a leader?
I think knowing as much about how your brain works and how you work in social settings is helpful, because then you can figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are with that. But again, if you're not going anywhere, you're not a leader because you have to have a destination and you have to have people following you. So if nobody is following you and you're not going anywhere, then you're just a manager. And there are directors who are managers and they are just trying to get through the day in, day out. Everybody came in and everybody left alive and only slightly dented. You know, like there are definitely directors that are managers, not leaders.
Okay, so why would you want to be a leader as a director versus a manager?
Because programs that don't change die.
So the only way you're going to change is if you're a leader versus a manager. Is that?
I don't know if it's the only way, but I think it's the best way because you're driving towards something as opposed to letting the shifts of the economy, the community decide whether or not you're continuing to be here.
COVID
or, you know, things happening in the political realm or
state budgets.
Yeah, state budgets, city changing zoning. You know, there's lots of things that
Major employers moving.
yeah.
Right, yeah.
And if you're not driving the improvements and the changes in your program, then you're at the whims of other people. And so knowing your strengths and weaknesses is key, but so is having a direction.
Okay, so some self-awareness, having a direction. So if you're a director and you're not the owner, how do you lead and not step on somebody's toes?
You communicate.
What?
Basically, you know, my father-in-law is well, I guess people probably don't know. My father-in-law is a pilot. And so he can fly the airplane just by himself. So that's if you are an owner-director. You are a pilot who is flying that airplane all by yourself. You're flying that childcare program all by yourself. But if you're going to go on a long haul, if he's flying from Texas to Washington State, he doesn't want to fly that airplane by himself. He wants somebody else in the cockpit. He wants either a navigator or a co-pilot because you're going a long distance. You need someone else to be like, hey, can you look at this for a while? I've got to like rest my eyes. I've got to stretch, whatever.
So almost like a road trip. You got the person who's driving, you got the person who's shotgun, who's in charge of the music, and they got the person in the back seat that's in charge of snacks.
I mean, frequently, yes. I would never, you know, the airplane is more what was in my head because you're looking at where you're going. I guess you look at where you're going when you're driving. I just can't see very far ahead of me. I've got really bad eyesight.
I'm a little nervous.
So I think having that co-pilot, and if you're an owner-director, I'm not saying that you can't have a co-pilot. I'm actually saying please go get one. And that co-pilot can be a coach or a consultant if you don't want to have a director outside of yourself or you don't want to have an assistant director.
Absolutely. I mean, we've done episodes on creating your team and your advisory team, your advisory board, that isn't necessarily the people who work with you day in and day out. They may be people you've never met. We've talked about mentors, that sometimes that mentor is just somebody who you listen to on a podcast.
Yeah,
I don't know, like maybe us. And sometimes those mentors are people who wrote a book. They may not ever know who you are, but they left such an impression that it's now part of who you are as a manager, who you are as a leader. Might really have shaped your vision, your mission, and as you said, your direction, which way you're going.
So I just want to think a little bit about how, if somebody was listening to my little rant a second ago about are you just a manager or are you a leader, and they're feeling a little called out and they're like, yeah, I just want to make sure everybody leaves alive at the end of the day. I don't have time for figuring out what are industry trends. I just need to make sure that all the shifts are covered and all the kids are within ratio. How can that person who's in the manage phase because their business is going through a transition or they just stepped into this role and they were unaware of all the things, how do they move from the manager to the leader?
But it also may be that their owner is the visionary and the owner is the leader, and their job is literally just to kind of keep all the ducks in a row. I mean, I think that especially when you start thinking about leadership styles and how they impact a team, understanding that you may be a manager and that might be perfect for your program. Because if you think about the really, really large, either large nonprofits or government-funded kind of nonprofit childcare programs, they don't get a lot of say in where they're going. They're kind of told, this is what you're gonna do. And so being a great manager and having staff who love you and parents who love you is still really, really important. But if you are privately owned or even a nonprofit that doesn't have a wealthy benefactor or some sort of organization that's always giving you money and you have to go out and find your people, I think that it's really important to remember that sometimes we need both.
Yeah, I think, and as you were doing hand gestures with the, keeping the ducks in line, I was like, this reminds me of Babe the Pig, like scooping from behind or a shepherd dog or something like that.
I was just thinking to myself, like, so everybody needs a collie.
So Kate had one of those dogs. She thinks everybody needs one. But I think there is a need for both the manager and the leader. And I think trying to do both at the same time is where people get into trouble.
Okay, so if you are feeling overwhelmed and you've been listening to this episode and you might still not totally have it, I'm going to try to summarize it, Carrie, as we kind of wrap up, and you tell me if I'm kind of maybe at a starting point for somebody. I want you to sit down and think about, who's all part of that leadership team. And leadership, I mean by the people in charge. The owner, director, assistant director, even you.
Lead teachers.
Who is leading? Who is managing? What is your role and how do you all work together? Because that's part of that self-awareness, is not only what do I know about myself, what do I like? Because if you like just being the duck and being the visionary and leading and deciding where you're going, and you've got a strong team behind you and that there's somebody back there who's going to make sure, who's going to shepherd all your little ducks and get you where you're going, this might be perfect. This might work really, really well in your business. But if you've got some hiccups anywhere, it could be enrollment, it could be in staffing, it could be in parent relations, maybe that's where there's a need for some reflection on, am I leading or am I a duck?
I think that makes a lot of sense. And so now we've got, are you a duck? Are you a collie? Or are you a leader? So I don't know that is a book. I think that's going to be complicated to make that into a book.
I think that was Leadership by Duck Goose.
If you want to be a collie, that's great. I think if you have the title of director and you just want to be a duck, we have a problem. I think that as a director, you either have to be that collie or you have to be the goose. You've got to be the leader or you've got to be the manager. I don't think you can be a duck.
All right. Well, thank you so much. So if you've been listening to this episode, we would love to have you reach out and touch base with us. Let us know what you liked about the episode. Want you to know that if you aren't sure which one you are and you want some coaching about guiding your program,
or because you found out listening to this that you're a duck and now you have to decide if you should be a goose or a collie, then let us know. We'd be happy to help you, to coach you through that transition, that metamorphosis into being the best director you can be for the program you're in right now. Because you may have been a caterpillar, but we're going to make you a butterfly.
We got too many animals.
Too many animals. Anyway, if you liked this episode, or if you want us to never go down this animal rabbit hole again, please let us know. So let us know. You can email us, Kate and Carrie at Childcare Conversations, or you can go to the pod mail option on your podcast player of choice. And if you learned something, share the show with somebody else who needs to know. Talk to you next week.
Thanks for tuning in. We love bringing you real talk and fresh insight from the world of early childhood education. Be sure to follow us on social media to stay connected and catch all of the latest episodes. And if you're planning a conference, training, or special event, Kate and Carrie would love to speak to your audience. You can learn more about their keynote sessions and workshops at kateandcarrie.com. If you learned something today, share the show, and leave us a review below. We'll see you next time on Childcare Conversations.